Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be showing off new Banlist SkyStrikers. We've got multiple gameplays, multiple deck profiles, so you guys can kind of get an idea on what this deck can do. Even though Engage is only one card for them on the newer Banlist, it's a huge deal. It's basically what runs the deck. Not only do you get the ability to add whatever card that you want, but also being able to draw that extra card potentially when you have 3 more spells, which is kind of just how the whole SkyStriker archetype works. We'll show off some of the gameplay of it winning, we'll show it losing, and a lot of different varieties so you guys can kind of get an idea on how to play the deck. Now, just as a heads up, this is still one of the best decks, but it doesn't have like an insane turn 1. A lot of times they won't open up the board with like multiple negates, but it is going to be a grind game oriented deck. So if you kind of miss that, SkyStrikers is definitely going to be a deck for you, where like you're not going to be opening up the board that just negate, and your opponent just quits the game. This one, it's more of a grind game, and you will definitely be punished if you make any mistakes with this, because yeah, this deck, it doesn't go so well when you want to, or if you like the playstyle of like, I'm going to destroy my opponent before they even get a chance to play. You essentially out-resource them over a course of time. Now, this guy went ahead and just said GG. It's going to be difficult for him to compete with just this one card, especially since the guy has a full board. But there's a lot of different duels in here. We'll show it off against, this is Zoo Tri-Brigade over here. This deck is still up and running. It's kind of like an AA Zeus Turbo variant for most of the builds. But I got a lot of different builds to show you guys. You can even main deck certain cards like Lancia. There can only be one. There's a lot of really good cards in this deck that you can just like main deck if you happen to be matched up against a very specific matchup that you'll just automatically win. There are some cards like that that'll just be kind of like a floodgate. As there's a lot of things that SkyStrikers don't really worry too much about. They have specifically Widow Anchor. That's like their ace card pretty much. So there's not too many like disruptions for the archetype. Usually they will almost always have Widow Anchor. So if you're playing up against this deck, always expect them to have this card set face down. Now also, the deck can instantly lose to cards like Imperial Order. That is one thing I want to go ahead and mention. Surprisingly, that card hasn't been banned. I think a lot of people do want it banned, but nonetheless, you guys can let me know how you feel about Imperial Order. But I technically had one gameplay where the guy did play out of it, but it would be like a really long video, like half an hour. So for this, I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys a bunch of different like gameplays, different matchups and stuff. And sometimes with this deck though, one thing I've noticed that the deck does lose to quite a bit is a Link monster, which you guys will see busted out over here. The deck can definitely play off of running Mystic Mine, and it is a really good card in the deck, but for the gameplay sake, I'm not going to really include the Mystic Mine gameplays, but it is a huge way that this deck can basically set up, get a lot of resources, and then attempt to go ahead and throw on their field spell, then they basically out-resource you via just like one turn. That is like the way that you can play the deck, and I would say that it's probably still viable, but for gameplay sakes, yeah, it's not very fun waiting for people go pass for 10-15 turns. So for that reason, I will admit though, it is a great card in the deck, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we go over the deck profiles for this SkyStriker deck. But pretty much most of them are going to be the same. You can main deck Drone Lock. Ghost Bell is another really popular card that everyone is pretty much playing at least 1 or 2 copies of in a lot of different decks. It's not just for SkyStrikers, but SkyStrikers definitely need some hand traps as well, because again, your plays usually end up with Widow Anchor, and you just use multi-roll and you just keep on resetting a bunch of the variety of cards that you used. But time and time again, I've seen this deck lose to Access Code Talker specifically because this card has a massive amount of attack. You can't respond to it, and the guy's just going to go ahead and say, well, you know, I went through everything. That's pretty much just going to be GG. Oh, I can't even click on it. But pretty much it's going to be GG. So like I said, I will show the deck lose. I will show it win. And this is just, again, for variety's sake. But like I mentioned before, this card, Ghost Bell, is fantastic. Well, another thing I want to mention with there can only be one. Yes, it does stop certain decks from functioning, but I think a lot of times you're better off just running something that would be as an extra negate, where that's like a Solemn or other hand traps. I think overall it can be better, because we'll talk a little bit more about like deck building in this. Yes, this can, if you activate this against certain matchups, you can instantly win. But with so many decks nowadays, it forces them to go into Phoenix, yes, but you still have to have then a response, potentially, if they happen to have a follow-up play. And a lot of the meta decks like Drytron, or anything that has like multiple follow-up plays, they can overwhelm you, even after, like in this instance over here, you're going to see them get rid of there can only be one. And then if you don't have the follow-up plays, like even though we had, you know, multiple hand traps, so the guy YuGiOh over here, and like I said, we got multiple different builds from different players here, it can still be relatively rough, and it's better to know exactly what to negate at the right time, and that will definitely be something that you will have to learn with this deck. You have to basically know your matchups and what you need to negate specifically versus like Ash Blossoming, like a Terraforming, when you don't even know what your opponent is playing. Because this deck will punish you absolutely if you, use your one negate, because that's generally what the deck can have. Yeah, you can have more in the forms of other things, but the thing is, that's just the way that the deck works. But you'll see Shizuku over here being able to search out that additional card. But pretty much, you're just going to be trying to utilize Engage as much as possible, as that's a very important card. Now he's going to go into the Fafnir, and he's going to activate the Meteonis, getting out the Cyber Angel Identon, and get out all those searches. So, like, you can see that when this board has, like, no back row, because, like, technically, yeah, you can still play hand traps. There's not, like, necessarily, like, an Honest that they would play for the most part, or any cards that they'd be able to activate in their hands specifically for the archetype that most people would be playing. It's just basically you rely on your Link monster going away, you bring back Ray, and then Ray brings back another Link monster to try to block some damage for you. That's kind of how the deck runs in terms of, like, it being on the passive side. But again, you need to be able to know exactly what to negate now. Once again, we got the Area Zero, searching out an extra card, but we got a Widow Anchor over here. And that is the main card. So we are going to stop the Nova, and then we top deck into Ray, which, yeah, is pretty good. You might be thinking, all right, he's got this in the bag. Because generally how SkyStrikers work is, again, they just out-resource your opponent. And then we've got Engage. He's taking some damage, activating that Engage. But, of course, Ash Blossom is definitely going to say no to that, because that's a way too plus. And then Shizuku is going to be able to re-add a additional card over there. And we see the Nova activated, bringing back the Drytrons, and he's going to go ahead and combo off. But remember, there's still Widow Anchor. You need to know exactly what to actually negate, or I guess in this case, we're Snatch Stealing the Fafnir. But there are so many decks where there's just like a follow-up play, and if you negate the wrong thing and have that follow-up card, or you maybe just didn't negate the right thing, you will absolutely lose. And at this point, he knows he has Area Zero, so it's time to go all in. And when you can go all in against SkyStrikers, you got to go all in, because you never know when that Mystic Mine is just going to be slapped onto the field, and you will absolutely get obliterated by, you know, not being able to YuGiOh. But nowadays, I think there's a lot more back row removal that people are playing, like Cyclone, Twin Twisters, and it's specifically against Salamangreat. That deck is so popular. This, and I would say SkyStrikers, are super, super, super popular right now. I have so many actual gameplays, but I want to show it off against the new Pendulums, because, you know, Skullcrab Joker is another one of those newer cards. Obviously, we're talking about the newest ban list over here. But again, I think that you can learn more off of SkyStrikers in general when the deck actually loses versus like it just wins via out-resourcing. That's why I showed you guys a lot more losses. But I do want to show off losses in, you know, deck profiles and like gameplay nowadays, because I think it's important to show you that the deck is not like unbeatable, because, you know, as a content creator myself, a lot of times we always select like the best gameplays, and I think it's good to have a variety of just like mediocre in terms of like gameplay of like it doesn't have to open up with negate everything. Not that SkyStrikers really can do that, although a lot of the cards are not necessarily like once per turn. But most of them, since you're only able to add like the variety of them, and he decided to go ahead and get Nibiru'd, but you know, SkyStrikers, they're a very resilient deck, as in like they only need one card to go completely off. Now, obviously with the Engage, there's that whole discussion of playing Desires. I think that you can still get away with it, and we'll talk a little bit about that once we get into the deck profiles. But with Engage being at 1, like if you banish this card, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I still think you can play Desires as long as like you get that Engage ASAP, you throw it into the graveyard, because, you know, a lot of people will be playing cards that just foolish. Burial Goods, and you can just throw that card in the grave, then you can recycle it. But yeah, if you Desires banish it, I would say, yeah, you have a very high chance of losing simply due to this card not existing in your graveyard or your deck. It's just such an important card for the archetype, and I think it's a deck that people really, really liked the playstyle of, and I can get it, because most YuGiOh decks will throw out these insane boards. Like, I mean, this deck, Pendulums, can throw out insane boards to the point where, like, you don't get to YuGiOh, right? Drytron can do the same thing, especially with, like, the Herald builds of like Orange Light. But again, like I mentioned before, a lot of times you'll see Access Code Talker be the card that usually finishes them off, as the deck will try to go Ray, Kagari. It'll basically just recycle some of the cards. So you'll be able to block a little bit, but when you start popping them again and again, and then you take that 5k to the face, any other follow-up monster usually can make it at game for them. But he's going to go ahead and search out that double or nothing. But is it going to be able to be used this turn? We'll wait and see. So we see Engage, and the thing that makes them so good is like just Afterburner. Going second is really key in this deck too. If you're like your first time learning the deck, go second in this deck. Do not go first. There's not enough negates that you can throw up realistically, and you want not only the extra card, but you want to know what your opponent is actually playing, because you can kind of try to set up. But even turn one, you still would want to try to throwing up that Widow Anchor. But like you said, there's some gameplay of the deck, but I want to show you guys a variety of deck profiles over here. So this one was just the guy his name was Player. But some people are main decking certain things. A lot of people are main decking Crow in different decks. Keep in mind some of these gameplays that we've seen, and I'll include all these as downloadable files. So if you just want to like download it, one click, it'll be in the Discord. But like cards like Gamma Seal can still be excellent even running it in the main deck, but like I would say for the most part, like in this build in particular, you can play the deck a lot of different ways. I'm not a fan of running like Judgment myself. I think that there are better options in terms of like Droplets is also a fantastic card, because not only is it a spell, because you need to get those 3 in order to be able to activate all of your like bonus effects. Like with Engage, you get the bonus, right? So keep that in mind as well when you're running more traps versus other spells. You can go Droplets, or if you're on the budget, you can even run Chalice. Sometimes it's pretty much the same, although Chalice sometimes has that 400 boost, sometimes can make a difference. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and mouse over these really quick, as there's so many that I want to cover. But in terms of this first build, this one's more like Solemn heavy, and this one's running Gamma Seal. There's a lot of different varieties of builds. I could see Pagantrops being great as well, but keep in mind some of the cards will say like you can't control like a monster in the main monster zone, but usually with Pagantrop is not that big of a deal. You have a quick effect, so I like this card as well. Some people are opting to play Avarice to recycle certain cards, even though like if we go to the actual like ban list over here, or if you can go OCG, we got that card at 1 too, but like in terms of SkyStrikers, the only real difference here with the ban list is just the Engage. That's like a huge deal though. And then on top of that, like I said, I'll mouse over the cards relatively quick. That's just another thing that I've been seeing. There's also the alternate artwork and Ghost Spell, so keep in mind it's the same card. Certain times against Dragoons, usually you try to prevent him from coming out. I actually have so much more gameplay, but trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter than like half an hour when I'm showing it win, lose, and like multiple different deck profiles. This card is great against Dragoon, and that's what it's basically used for. And I get it, like it's a really good card against him. But you can see again most of these different builds. This one over here, Lancelot, he's opting to play this card as well. And most of the builds are pretty much the same. It's like triple Ray, double Rose, and then it's like 2 copies of like most of the like Afterburner, 0. A lot of people playing 2 copies of Shark Cannon, and then like obviously the one I was like you got to play Hornet Drones, you got to run the multi-roll as well. But then on top of that, like I mentioned before, a lot of people playing a little bit more back row destruction, Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclone. These can all be great answers. Again, it's a Salamangreat matchup. In fact, I even have a lot of duels versus Salamangreat, but trying to keep the video a little bit shorter here, like I mentioned before. But you can see people are also opting to run Solemn Strike. And there really hasn't been too much of a change, but that one card can make a huge difference, like I mentioned before. They engage specifically. And there are people also, again, playing Desires just to try to make the deck go faster. And I even think that Avarice can be good, even if you want to go ahead and max out more hand traps. Like I mentioned before, DD Crow is a fantastic card in the main deck, again, against Salamangreat, which is a very, very popular deck. I don't know if I would consider Salamangreat like the top 5 decks right now. I think Drytron is still very, very powerful in the game, but specifically, like if you're able to hand trap your opponent pretty hard, then you can Avarice and reset. Plus, it's the other spell, but keep in mind that it can offer the potential for bricks. But when you play other cards like Desire to kind of help circumvent that, you could consider that as well to draw into more monsters, so your Avarice has more potential, because you definitely go through your extra deck very, very fast in here. And that's just, something that you can play. Now, I did mention that Mystic Mind is a fantastic card. I didn't really want to show off Mystic Mind gameplay, but I will say that it is good. The reason why is it just doesn't make it entertaining entertaining, and it makes the video a lot longer than I would say necessary. But you can play this card. I think that this card is definitely great at like at least one of, because it does open up the doors for this deck to actually pull off like win conditions. Specifically, it's like 99% of the time it's you snatch steal a monster, and then you go access Kotaku, you pop everything else, and you just swing for game. That's a lot of times what will be happening. The Mind Control is another fantastic card for this deck, as well, that, you know, not every deck will play, but, you know, depending on your playstyle, what you'll like to do, you can consider that card as well. But pretty much the extra deck is always the same. Like these are really important cards. Well, that are not part of the SkyStriker archetype. This card actually is these two that people don't always, you know, see them pop out, but like these are the cards that most of them people play, and like everything else is basically well, usually you want 3. Hayate is really great as well, especially if you get locked down by Imperial Order. Being able to just attack directly and then paying the extra life points every single turn can definitely help out quite a bit. But anyways, guys, that's going to be the new Banlist SkyStriker deck profiles as well as the gameplay, so you guys can kind of get an idea on what the deck can do. And Engage is definitely a fantastic card in addition to them. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you guys are new here and do want to see more gameplays and deck profiles of all the new things coming out for the new July 1st ban list, and you guys do want to see some more content, make sure you guys subscribe, turn that bell, and you'll definitely see more. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you on the next video. And again, all the downloadables will be there via the Discord, and that'll be pinned. Anyways, peace.